to Read With Me series. Today we are starting with 10th Standard NCERT of Economics subject. The first chapter is Development. So we'll understand this. Basically we'll read the chapter. The idea of development or progress has always been with us. We have aspirations or desires about what we would like to do and how we would like to live. Similarly, we have ideas about what a country should be like. What are the essential things that we require? Can life be better for all? How should people live together? Can there be more equality? Development involves thinking about these questions and about the way in which we can work together towards achieving the goals. This is a complex task, and in this chapter we shall make beginning at understanding development. You will learn more about these issues in greater depth in higher classes. Also, you will find answers to many of these questions not just in economics but also in your course in history and political sciences. This is because the way we live together today is influenced by the past. We can't desire for change without being aware of this. In the same way, it is only through a democratic political process that these hopes and possibilities can be achieved in real time. So we'll see what more about development. What development promises? Different people, different goals. Let us try to imagine what development or progress is likely to mean to different persons listed in table 1.1. What are their aspirations? You will find that some columns are partially filled. Try to complete the table. You can also add any other category of persons. So we'll see developmental goals of different categories of person. So development is subjective. It will vary from person to person, right? Okay. For landless rural laborers, development goals or aspirations will be more days of work and better wages. Local school is able to provide quality education for their children. There is no social discrimination and they too can become leaders in the village. So they are searching for opportunity and better education and wages. Prosperous farmers in Punjab, they are from Punjab, what they'll aspire? Assured a high family income through higher support prices. We have seen about MSP, right? High support prices for their crops and through hand working and cheap laborers. Cheap labor is what they expect. They should be able to settle their children abroad. So these are their goals. We can just list. So we can see the third one. A girl from rich urban family, she gets as much freedom as her brother and is able to decide what she wants to do in life. She is able to pursue her studies abroad. So those are like different for different people is what they are trying to explain. Okay, let us now examine it. Do all of these persons have the same notion of development or progress? Of course no. Most likely not. Each one of them seeks different things. They seek things that are most important for them. That is, that which can fulfill their aspirations or desires. In fact, at times, two persons or group of persons may seek things which are conflicting. Right? A girl expects as much freedom and opportunity as her brother, and that he also shares in the household work. Her brother may not like this. Similarly, to get more electricity, industrialists may want more dams. But this may submerge the land and disrupt the lives of people who are displaced, such as tribals. They might resent this and may prefer small checks, dams or tanks to irrigate the land. Right? So, two things are quite clear. One, different person can have different developmental goals. And two, what may be development for one may not be development for other. Right? So what is development for one person may not be the same for other person. It may even be destructive for others. Yeah, it may be destructive also for other. Income and other goals now we see. If you go over table 1.1 again, you will notice one common thing what people desire are regular work, better wages, decent prices for their crops and other products that they produce. So in other words, they want more income. So that is what they are expecting. One common point is income. Besides seeking more income, one way or the other, people also seek things like equal treatment, freedom, security, and respect of others. They resent discrimination. So we don't want discrimination, we want equality, we want freedom and security also. All these are important goals. In fact, in some cases, these may be more important than more income or more consumption, because material goods are not all that you need to live. Money or material things that one can buy with it is one factor on which our life depends. But the quality of our life also depends on non-material things mentioned in above, right? If it is not obvious to you, then just think of the role of your friends in your life. You may desire their friendship. Similarly, there are many things that are not easily measured but they mean a lot to our lives. These are often ignored. So we want both material and non-material things. Sometimes non-material things will be more important as well. However, it will be wrong to conclude that what cannot be measured is not important. So these are measurable. Whichever not measurable, we can't say that is not important, right? Those are also important. Consider another example. If you get a job in a far off place, before accepting it, you would try to consider many factors. Apart from income, such as facilities for your family, working atmosphere, or opportunity to learn. In another case, a job may give you less pay but may offer regular employment that enhances your sense of security. Another job, however, may offer high pay but no job security and also leave no time for your family. This will reduce your sense of security and freedom. So there are different scenarios, right? Similarly, for development, people look at mix of goals. It is true that if women are engaged in paid work, their dignity in the household and society increases. However, it is also the case that if there is respect for women, there would be more sharing of housework and a greater acceptance of women working outside. A safe and secure environment may allow more women to take up a variety of jobs or run businesses, right? So hence the developmental goals that people have are not only about better income but also about other important things like security, freedom, etc. So now we'll see about national development. If, as we have seen above, individuals seek different goals, often their notion of national development is also likely to be different. Discuss among yourself on what India should do for development. So this is kind of discussion, but we'll continue reading. Most likely you would find that different students in the class have given different answers to the above questions. In fact, you might yourself think of many different answers and not too sure of any of this. It is very important to keep in mind that different persons could have different as well as conflicting notions of a country's development. We have different notions as well, right? However, can all the ideas be considered equally important? Or if there are conflicts, how does one decide? What would be a fair and just path for all? We also have to think whether there is better way of doing things. Would the idea benefit a large number of people or only a small group? National development means thinking about these questions. Okay? So how to compare different countries or states? So that's what we'll see now. You might ask, if development can mean different things, how come some countries are generally called developed and others underdeveloped? Before we come to this, let us consider another question. When we compare different things, they could have similarities as well as differences. Which aspect do we use to compare them? Let us look at students in a class itself. How do we compare different students? They differ in their height, health, talent, and interests. The healthiest student may not be the most studious one. The most intelligent student may not be the friendliest one. So, how do we compare students? The criteria we may use depends on purpose of comparison. We use different criteria to choose a sport team, a debate team, a music team, or a team to organize a picnic. Still, if for some purpose we have to choose the criteria for all-round progress of children in the school, how shall we do it? Usually, we take one or more important characteristics of person and compare them based on these characteristics. Of course, there can be differences about what are important characteristics that should form the basis of comparison. Friendliness and spirit of cooperation, creativity or marks secured. This is true of development too. For comparing countries, their income is considered to be one of the most important attributes. So income is one of the important attributes. Countries with higher income are more developed than others with less income. This is based on the understanding that more income means more of all things that human beings need. Whatever people like and should have, they will be able to get with greater income. So greater income itself is considered to be one important goal. Now, what is the income of a country? Intuitively, the income of a country is the income of all the residents of a country. Income of all the residents of a country. This gives us the total income of a country. However, for comparison between countries, total income is not such an useful measure. Since countries have different population, comparing total income will not tell us what an average person is likely to earn. Are people in one country better off than other in a different country? Hence, we compare the average income, which is the total income of the country divided by its population. The average income is also called per capita income. The average income also called as per capita income. In World Development Report 2006 brought out by the World Bank, World Development Report by World Bank, this criteria is used in classifying countries. Countries with per capita income of rupees 4,53,000 per annum and above in 2004 are called rich countries. Those with per capita income of rupees 37,000 or less are called low income countries. India comes in the category of low income countries because its per capita income in 2004 was just rupees 28,000 per annum. The rich countries, excluding countries of Middle East and certain other small countries, are generally called developed countries. So, income and other criteria. When we look at individual aspirations and goals, we found that people not only think of better income but also have goals such as security, respect and other equal treatment, freedom, etc. in mind. Similarly, when we think of a nation or a region, we may, beside average income, think of other equally important attributes. What could be these attributes too? Let us examine this through an example. Table 1.3 gives the per capita income of Punjab, Kerala and Bihar. Okay. Actually, these figures are of per capita net state domestic product at current prices for 2002-3. Let us ignore what this complicated term exactly means. Roughly, we can take it to be per capita income of a state. We find that of the three, Punjab has higher per capita income and Bihar is bottom. This means that on an average, a person in Punjab earns rupees 26,000 in 1 year, whereas on an average, a person in Bihar would earn only around 5,500 rupees. So, if per capita income were to be used as the measure of development, Punjab will be considered the most developed and Bihar the least developed state of the three. Now, let us look at certain other data pertaining to these states given below in the table. So, Punjab, infant mortality rate if you see 49. In Kerala it's only 11. But Bihar it is 60. Literacy rate if you see Punjab 70%. Whereas in Kerala it is 91%. And if you see Bihar it is 47. And net attendance ratio for class 1 to 5 is 81% in Punjab, 91% in Kerala and 41% in Bihar. So these are the data they have given, which are other parameter other than income, right? So explanation if we see, infant mortality rate IMR indicates the number of children that die before the age of 1 year. Before the age of 1 year, as proportion of 1,000 lives children born in that particular year, in proportion to 1,000 live children born in that particular year. So it's like number of children die before 1 year as a proportion of 1,000 live children born in that year. Then we see literacy rate measures the proportion of literate population in the 7 and above age group. 7 and above age group. Net attendance ratio is the total number of children of age group 6 to 10 attending school as a percentage of total number of children in the same age group. 6 to 10 is a net attendance ratio. So what does this table show? The first column of a table shows that in Kerala, out of 1,000 children born alive, 11 died before completing 1 year of age. But in Punjab, the proportion of children dying within 1 year of birth is 49, which is nearly 5 times more. On the other hand, the per capita income of Punjab is much more than Kerala as shown in table 1.3. We have seen. Just think of how dear you are to your parents. Think of how everyone is so happy when a child is born. Now try to think of parents whose children die before they even celebrate their first birthday. How painful it must be to these parents. And next, note the year to which this data pertains. It is 2003. So we are not talking of old times. It is 56 years after independence when our metro towns are full of high-rise buildings and shopping malls. The problem does not end with infant mortality rate. The last column shown that half of the children in Bihar do not even get to go to school. This means that if you went to school in Bihar, more than half of your class would be missing. Those who could have been in school are not there. If this had happened to you, you would not be able to read what you are reading now. So we'll see about the next one, public facilities. How is it that the average person in Punjab has more income than the average person in Kerala but lags behind in these crucial areas? The reason is money in your pocket cannot buy all the goods and services that you may need to live well. So, income by itself is not a completely adequate indicator of material goods and services that citizens are able to use. For example, normally your money cannot buy you a pollution-free environment or ensure that you get unadulterated medicines unless you can afford to shift to community that already has all these things. Money may also not be able to protect you from infectious diseases unless the whole of your community takes preventive steps. Actually, for many of important things in life, the best way, also the cheapest way, is to provide these goods and services collectively. Just think, will it be cheaper to have collective security for the whole locality or for each house to have its own security man? What if no one other than you in your village or locality is interested in studying? Would you be able to study? Not unless your parents could afford to send you to some private school elsewhere. So, you are actually able to study because many other children also want to study and because many people believe that the government should open schools and provide other facilities so that all children have a chance to study. Even now, in many areas, children, particularly girls, are not able to achieve secondary level schooling because government or society has not provided adequate facilities. Kerala has a low infant mortality rate because it has adequate provision of basic health and educational facilities. Similarly, in some states, the public distribution system functions well. If some PDS shops, that is ration shops, do not function properly in such places, the people there are able to get the problem rectified. Health and nutrition status of a people of such state is certainly likely to be better. So now we can see Human Development Report. Once it is realized that even though the level of income is important, yet it is an inadequate measure of level of development, we begin to think of other criterion. There could be a long list of such criterion, but then it would not be so useful. What we need is a small number of most important things. Health and education indicators such as the one we used in comparison of Kerala and Punjab are among them. Health and education. Over the past decade or so, health and education indicators have come to be widely used along with income as a measure of development. So income, health and education. For instance, Human Development Report published by UNDP compares countries based on the educational level of a people, their health status and per capita income. It would be interesting to look at certain relevant data regarding India and its neighbor from Human Development Report. Now it is 2024 has been released. Now we have to look into it. Isn't it surprising that a small country in our neighborhood, Sri Lanka, is much ahead of India in every respect, and big country like ours has such a low rank in world? So according to 1.6 table they are talking, also shows that though Nepal has half the per capita income of India, yet it is not far behind India in life expectancy and literacy levels. Many improvements have been suggested in calculating Human Development Index, and many new components have been added to the Human Development Report, but by prefixing human to development, it has made it very clear that what is important in development is what is happening to citizens of a country. It is people, their health, their well-being, what is most important. That is what most important. Do you think there are certain other aspects that should be considered in measuring human development? So now we'll go for in development. When we are talking, we should be also talking about sustainability of development. We have not inherited the world from our forefathers. We have borrowed it from our children. We are borrowing it from children, not inherited from our forefathers. Okay. So Whichever way we define development, suppose for a present that a particular country is quite developed, we would certainly like this level of development to go up further or at least be maintained for future generation. This is obviously desirable. However, since the second half of the 20th century, a number of scientists have been warning that the present type and level of development are not sustainable. Let's understand why this is so. Through the following example, they are giving example. You will read this. Recent groundwater in India. Recent evidence suggests that the groundwater is under serious threat of overuse in many parts of the country. About 300 districts have reported a water level decline of over 4 meters during the past 20 years. Nearly one-third of a country is overusing their groundwater reserves. In another 25 years, 60% of the country would be doing the same if the present way of using this resource continues. Groundwater overuse is particularly found in the agriculturally prosperous regions of Punjab and Western UP, hard rock plateau areas of central and south India, some coastal areas, and the rapidly growing urban settlements. So this is one of the unsustainable practice. Groundwater is an example of renewable resources. It's an example of renewable sources. These resources are replenished by nature as in the case of crop and plants. However, even these resources may be overused. For example, in the case of a groundwater, if we use more than what is being replenished by rain, then we would be overusing this resource. Non-renewable resources are those which will get exhausted after years of use. We have a fixed stock on earth which cannot be replenished. We do discover new resources that we did not know of earlier. New sources in this way add to the stock. However, over time, even this will get exhausted. For example, crude oil that we extract from the earth is non-renewable resource. However, we may find a source of oil that we did not know of earlier. Exploring are being undertaken all the time. Consequences of environmental degradation do not respect national or state boundaries. This issue is no longer region or nation specific. Our future is linked together. Sustainability of development is comparatively a new area of knowledge in which scientists, economics, philosophers, and other social sciences are working together. In general, the question of development or progress is perennial. At all times, as a member of society and as individual, we need to ask where we want to go, what we wish to become, and what our goals are. So the debate on development continues. Development continues. So this is what about development. What now we studied? Development is not only income, it is also about other non-materialistic elements such as security, health, education. So to measure that, we have Human Development Index by World Bank. Also we saw about sustainable development. So all these are the topics of this chapter. That's all for today. With me series. Now we are going to continue with NCERT 10th Standard Chapter 2. That's about sectors of Indian economy. An economy is best understood when we study its components or sectors. Sectoral classification can be done on the basis of several criteria. In this chapter, 3 types of classification are discussed: primary, secondary, and tertiary, organized, unorganized, and public and private. These are the categories that we are going to discuss. You can create a discussion about these types by taking example familiar to the students and to relate them to their daily life. It is important to emphasize the changing role of a sectors. This can be highlighted further by drawing attention of the student to the rapid growth of service sector. While elaborating the ideas provided in the chapter, the student may need to be familiarized with a few fundamental concepts such as gross domestic product, employment, etc. Since the students may find this difficult to understand, it is necessary to explain to them through examples. Several activities and exercises are suggested in the chapter to help the student to understand how a person's activity could be placed whether in the primary or secondary or tertiary, organized, unorganized, and public or private sector. You may encourage the student to talk to various working people around them, such as shop owners, casual workers, vegetable vendor, workshop mechanics, domestic workers, etc. to know more about how they live and work. Based on such information, the students can be encouraged to develop their own classification of economic activities. Another important issue to be highlighted is about the problem caused by the change in the roles of a sector. The chapter has taken the example of unemployment and what the government can do to solve it. The declining importance of agriculture and growing importance of industry and services should be related to the experience of a children by taking more examples that may observe in their day-to-day life. Information derived from the media and could be used for this purpose. You may encourage the students to bring important cuttings and stories from newspapers which could be prominently displayed in storyboards and encourage the class to discuss these issues. While discussing the unorganized sector, the key issue of protecting workers engaged in the sector should be highlighted. You may also encourage the student to visit persons and enterprises in the unorganized sector and get first-hand experience from real-life situation. Sources for information: the GDP data used in this chapter pertaining to gross domestic product at factor cost by industries of origin at 1993-94 prices is taken from economic survey. It is a valuable source of GDP and the other information relating to Indian economy. For evaluation purposes, particularly to develop the analytical ability of learners, teachers can refer to economic survey to get data for different years. The employment figures are based on data taken from the 5-year survey on the employment and unemployment conducted by the National Sample Survey Organization. NSSO is an organization under the Ministry of Statistics, Planning and Program Implementation. MOSPI, Government of India. The website you can log on to is mospinic.in. Employment data is also available from other sources such as Census of India. So it is just a heads up. So second chapter is about sectors of Indian economy. Sectors of Indian activity, economic activities. Sectors of economic activities. Let us look at these pictures. You will find that people are engaged in various economic activities. Some of these are activities producing goods. Some other are producing minute even as we speak. So they are producing every minute. How do we understand these activities? One way of doing this is to group them, classify them using some important criterion. These groups are also called sectors. There could be several ways of classification depending on the purpose and what one thing is an important criteria. We begin by looking at different kind of economic activities. There are many activities that are undertaken by directly using natural resources. There are many activities that are undertaken by directly using natural resources. Directly using natural resources. Take for example the cultivation of cotton. It takes place within a crop season. For the growth of a cotton plant, we depend mainly but not entirely on natural resources like rainfall, sunshine, climate. The product of this activity, cotton, is natural product. Similarly, in the case of an activity like dairy, we are dependent on the biological process of the animals and availability of fodder. So the product here, milk, also is a natural product. Similarly, mineral and ore are also natural products. When we produce a good, by exploiting natural resource. It is an activity of the primary sector. Why primary? This is because it forms the base for all other products that we subsequently make. Since most of the natural products are we get are from agriculture, dairy, fishing, forestry, this sector is also called agriculture and related sector. Okay. The secondary sector covers activities in which natural products are changed into other forms through ways of manufacturing that we associate with industrial activity. It is the next step after primary. The product is not produced by nature but has to be made, and therefore some process of manufacturing is essential. This could in a factory or workshop or at home. For example, using cotton fiber from the plant, spin yarn and weave cloth. Using sugar cane as a raw material, we make sugar or gur. We convert earth into bricks and use bricks to make houses and buildings. Since this sector gradually becomes associated with the different kinds of industries that came up, it is also called as industrial sector. After primary and secondary, there is a third category of activities that fall under tertiary sector and is different from the above two. These are activities that help in development of a primary and secondary sector. These activities by themselves do not produce the goods, but they are an aid or support for the production of process. They will help, okay, they support the process. For example, goods that are produced in primary or secondary sector would need to be transported by trucks or trains and then sold in wholesale and retail shop. At times it may be necessary to store these in godowns. We also may need to talk to others over telephone or send letters, communication, or borrow money from banking to help production and trade. Transport, storage, communication, banking, trade are some examples of tertiary activity. Since this activity generates service rather than goods, the tertiary sector is also called service sector. Service sector also includes some essential services that may not directly help in the production of goods. For example, we require teacher, doctor, and those who provide personal service such as washerman, barber, cobbler, lawyer, and people to do administration and accounting works. In recent times, certain new services based on the information technology such as internet cafe, ATM booths, call centers, software companies, etc. have become important. So comparing the three sectors, the various production activities in the primary, secondary and tertiary sector produce a very large number of goods and services. Also, the three sectors have a large number of people working in them to produce these goods and services. The next step, therefore, is to see how much goods and services are produced and how many people work in each sector. In an economy, there could be one or more sectors which are dominant in terms of total production and employment, while other sectors are relatively small in size. We'll see which is dominating or not. Okay. How do we count the various goods and services and know the total production in each sector? How will we calculate goods and services to know total production in each sector? With so many thousands of goods and services produced, you might think this is an impossible task. Not only would the task to be enormous, you might also wonder how we can add up cars and computers and nail and furniture. It won't make sense. You are right in thinking so. To get around this problem, economists suggest that the value of goods and services should be used rather than adding up the actual numbers. For example, of 10,000 kgs of wheat is sold at rupees 8 per kg. The value of a wheat will be rupees 80,000. The value of 5,000 coconut at rupees 10 per piece. will be 50,000. Similarly, the value of goods and services in the three sectors are calculated and then added up. Understood? Okay. Remember, there is one precaution one has to take. Not every good or service that is produced and sold needs to be counted. It makes sense only to include the final goods and services. Take for instance a farmer who sells wheat to a flour mill for rupees 8 per kg. The mill grinds the wheat and sells the flour to a biscuit company for rupees 10 per kg. The biscuit company uses the flour and things such as sugar and oil to make 4 pockets of biscuit. It sells biscuit in the market to consumers for rupees 60, rupees 15 per packet. Biscuits are the final goods, that is goods that reach the customers or consumers. Why are only final goods and services counted? In contrast to final goods, goods such as wheat and the wheat flour in this example are intermediate goods. Intermediate goods are used up in producing final goods and service. The value of final goods already includes the value of all intermediary or intermediate goods that are used in making the final good. Hence, the value of rupees 60 for the biscuit final good already includes the value of flour rupees 10. Similarly, the value of all other intermediate goods would have been included. To count the value of the flour and the wheat separately is therefore not correct, because then we would be counting the value of the same thing a number of times. First was wheat, then was flour, and finally biscuits. The value of final goods and services in each sector during a particular year provides the total production of the sector for that year. So final goods and services, okay. And the sum of production in three sectors gives what is called as gross domestic product. So if you add up all the sectors final value of goods and services, then it becomes gross domestic product of a country. It is the value of all final goods and services produced within a country during a particular year. GDP shows how big economy is. In India, the mammoth task of measuring GDP is undertaken by central government ministry. This ministry, with the help of a various government department of all the Indian state and union territories, collects information relating to total volume of goods and services and their prices, and then estimates the GDP. Historical change in sector. Generally, it has been noted from the histories of many now developed countries that at initial stages of development, primary sector was the most important sector of economic activity. As the method of farming changed and agriculture sector began to prosper, it produced much more food than before. Many people could now take up other activities. There were increasing number of craft persons and traders. Buying and selling activities increased many times. Besides, there were also transporters, administrators, army, etc. However, at this stage, most of the goods produced were natural products from the primary sector, and most people were also employed in this sector. Over a long time, more than 100 years, and especially because new methods of manufacturing were introduced, factories came up and started expanding. Those people who had earlier worked on farms now began to work in factories in large number. People began to use many more goods that were produced in factories at cheap rates. Secondary sector gradually became the most important in total production and employment. Hence, over time, the shift had taken place. This means that the importance of a sector had changed. In the past 100 years, there has been a further shift from secondary to tertiary sector in developed countries. The service sector has become the most important in terms of total production. Most of the working people are also employed in the service sector. This is the general pattern observed in developed countries. What is the total production and employment in the three sectors in India? Over the years, have there been changes similar to the pattern observed for the developed countries? We shall see it in the next section. Okay. Primary, secondary and tertiary sectors in India. So graph 1 shows, they are talking about graph 1. This is the graph 1. So green primary, secondary yellow, tertiary purple. Okay. Graph 1 shows the production of a goods and services in the three sector. This is shown for 2 years, 1973 and 2003. You can see how the total production has grown over 30 years. So it was still here only 30,000. Now we're using 2,10,000, right? What does the comparison between 1973 and 2003 shows? What conclusion can you draw from the comparison? Let's find out. Okay, rising importance of the tertiary sector in production. Over 30 years between 1973 and 2003, while production in all the three sectors has increased, it has increased the most in the tertiary sector. As a result, in the year 2003, the tertiary sector has emerged as the largest producing sector in India, replacing the primary sector. Why the tertiary sector becoming so important in India? There could be several reasons. First, in any country, several services such as hospitals, education institutions, post and telegraph services, police station, courts, village administrative offices, municipal corporation, defense, transport, banks, insurance, companies, etc. are required. These can be considered as a basic services. In developing countries, the government has to take responsibility for the provision of these services. Second, the development of agriculture and industry lead to the development of a service such as transport, trade, etc. So greater than development of the primary and secondary sector, more would be the demand for such services. Third, the income level rise. Certain section of people start demanding many more services like eating out, tourism, shopping, private hospital, private schools, professional training, etc. You can see this change quite sharply in cities, especially in big cities. Fourth, over the past decade or so, certain new services such as those based on information and communication technology have become important and essential. The production of these services has been rising rapidly. In chapter 4, we shall see examples of these new services and the reasons for their expansion. However, you must remember that not all of the services sector is growing equally well. Service sector in India employs many different kinds of people. At one end, there are a limited number of services that employ highly skilled and educated workers. At the other end, there are a very large number of workers engaged in a service such as small shopkeepers, repair persons, transport persons, etc. These people barely manage to earn a living, and yet they perform these services because no alternative opportunity for work are available to them. Hence, only a part of this sector is growing in importance. You shall read more about this in next section. Okay. Yeah. Where are most of the people employed? Graph 2 they are showing here. This is the maximum. So it's in primary sector. So graph 2 presents percentage share of the three sectors in GDP. Now you can directly see the changing importance of the sector over 30 years. A remarkable fact about India is that while there has been a change in the share of three sectors in GDP, a similar shift has not taken place in employment. There is no employment, much generation here. Graph 3 shows the share of employment in the three sectors in 1973 and 2000. The primary sector continues to be the largest employer even in the year 2000. Why didn't similar shift out of primary sector happen in case of employment? It is because not enough jobs were created in the secondary and tertiary sector. That's the problem. That's why we have more employment even today in agriculture. Even though industrial output or the production of goods went up by 8 times during the period, employment in the industry went up only by 2.5 times. So 8 times, but employment growth is only 2.5 times. The same applies to the tertiary sector as well. While production in the service sector rose by 11 times, employment in the service sector rose less than 3 times. Okay. As a result, more than half of the workers in the country are working in the primary sector, mainly in agriculture, producing only a quarter of the GDP. In contrast to this, the secondary and tertiary sector produce 3/4 of produce, whereas they employ less than half the people. Does this mean that the workers in agriculture are not producing as much as they could? What it means that there are more people in agriculture than is necessary. So even if you move a few people out, production will not be affected. In other words, workers in agricultural sector are underemployed. So for instance, take the case of a small farmer Lakshmi owning about 2 hectares of unirrigated land dependent only on rain and growing crops like jowar and arhar. All 5 members of the family work in the plot throughout the year. Why? They have nowhere else to go for work. You will see that everyone is working. None remains idle, but in actual fact, their labor effort gets divided. Each one is doing some work, but no one is fully employed. This is the situation of underemployment, where people are apparently working, but all of them are made to work less than their potential. This kind of unemployment is hidden in contrast to someone who does not have a job and is clearly visible as unemployed. Hence, it is also called disguised unemployment. Now, supposing a landlord, Shukram, comes and hires 1 or 2 members of the family to work on his land. Lakshmi's family is now able to earn some extra income through wages. Since you do not need 5 members to look after that small plot, 2 people moving out does not affect production on their farm. In the above example, 2 people may move to work in a factory. Once again, the earning of the family would increase and they would also continue to produce as much from their land. There are lacks of farmers like Lakshmi in India. This means that even if we remove a lot of people from agricultural sector and provide them with proper work elsewhere, agricultural production will not suffer. The incomes of the people who take up other work would increase the total family income. This underemployment can also happen in other sectors. For example, there are thousands of casual workers in the service sector in urban areas who search for daily employment. They are employed as painters, plumbers, repair persons and other during odd jobs. Many of them don't find work every day. Similarly, we see other people of the service sector on the street pushing a cart or selling something where they may spend the whole day but earn very little. They are doing this work because they do not have better opportunities. How to create more employment? This is important now. We are saying it is like discussed unemployment, underemployment, no employment. So how to create employment? From above discussion, we can see that there continues to be considerable underemployment in agriculture. There are also people who are not employed at all. In what ways can we increase the employment for people? Let us look at some of them. Take the case of Lakshmi with her 2 hectares plot of unirrigated land. The government can spend some money or banks can provide a loan to construct a well for her family to irrigate the land. Lakshmi will then be able to irrigate her land and take a second crop, wheat, during the Rabi season. Let us suppose that 1 hectare of a wheat can provide employment to 2 people for 50 days, including sowing, watering, fertilizer, application and harvesting. So 2 more members of the family can be employed in her own field. Now suppose a new dam is constructed and canals are dug to irrigate many such farms. This could lead to a lot of employment generation within the agricultural sector itself, reducing the problem of underemployment. Now suppose Lakshmi and other farmers produce much more than before. They would also need to sell some of this. For this, they may be required to transport their produce to products to nearby towns. If the government invests some money in transportation and storage of crops or makes better rural roads to that mini trucks reach everywhere, several farmers like Lakshmi who now have access to water can continue to grow and sell these crops. This activity can provide productive employment to not just farmers but also others such as those in service like transport or trade. Lakshmi need is not confined to water alone. To cultivate the land, she also needs seeds, fertilizers, agricultural equipments, and pump sets to draw the water. Being a poor farmer, she cannot afford many of these, so she will have to borrow money from money lenders and pay a high rate of interest. If the local bank gives her credit at reasonable rate of interest, she will be able to buy all this in time and cultivate her land. This means that along with water, we also need to provide cheap agricultural credit to the farmers for farming to improve. We will look at some of these needs in chapter 3, money and credit. Another way by which we can tackle this problem is to identify, promote and locate industries and services in semi-rural areas where a large number of people may be employed. For instance, suppose many farmers decide to grow arhar and chickpea pulse crop, setting up a dal mill to procure and process these and sell in the cities is one such example. Opening a cold storage could give an opportunity for the farmers to store their products like potatoes and onions and sell them when the price is good. In villages near forest areas, we can start honey collection centers where farmers can come and sell wild honey. It is also possible to set up industries that processes vegetables and agricultural produces like potatoes, sweet potato, rice, wheat, tomato, fruits, which can be sold in outside markets. This will provide employment in industries located in semi-rural areas and not necessarily in large urban centers. What groups of people do you think are unemployed or underemployed in your area? Can you think of some measures that could be taken up for them? So, do you know that in India, there are about 200 million children in the school going age group. Out of this, only about 2/3 are attending schools. The rest are not. They may be at home or many of them may be working as child laborers. If these children are to attend schools, we will require more buildings, more teachers and more staff. A study conducted by the Planning Commission estimates nearly 20 lakh jobs can be created in education sector alone. Similarly, if we are to improve the health situation, we need many more doctors, nurses, health workers, etc. to work in rural areas. These are some ways by which jobs would be created, and we could also be able to address the important aspects of development talked about in chapter 1. Every state or region it has the potential for increasing the income and employment for people in that area. It could be tourism or regional craft industry or new service like IT. Some of these would require proper planning and support from the government. For example, the same study by the Planning Commission says that if the tourism as a sector is improved, every year we can give additional employment to more than 30 lakh people. We must realize that some of the suggestions discussed above would take a long time to implement. For the short term, we need some quick measures. Recognizing this, the central government in India recently made a law implementation, the right to work in 200 districts of India. It is called National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, NREGA. National Rural Employment Guarantee Act 2005. All those who are able to and are in need of work have been guaranteed 100 days of employment in a year by the government. If the government fails in its duty to provide employment, it will give unemployment allowances to the people. The types of work that would in future help to increase the production from land will be given preference under this act. So division of sectors as organized and unorganized. Let us examine another way of classifying activities in economy. This looks at the way people are employed. What are their conditions of work? Are there any rules and regulations that are followed as regard to their employment? So, Kanta works in the organized sector. Organized sector covers those enterprises or places of work where terms of employment are regular and therefore people have assured work. They are registered by the government. They are registered by the government and have to follow its rules and regulation, which are given in various laws such as the Forest Factories Act, Minimum Wages Act, Payment of Gratuity Act, Shops and Establishment Act. It is called organized because it has some formal process and procedures. Some of these people may not be employed by anyone but may work on their own, but they too have to register themselves with the government and follow the rules and regulations. Workers in the organized sector enjoy security of employment. They are expected to work only a fixed number of hours. If they work more, they have to be paid overtime by the employer. They also get several other benefits from employers. So what are these benefits? They get paid leave, payment during holidays, provident fund, gratuity, etc. They are supposed to get medical benefits, and under the laws, the factory manager has to ensure facilities like drinking water and safe working environment when they retire. These workers get pensions as well. In contrast, Kamal works in the unorganized sector. The unorganized sector is characterized by small and scattered units which are largely outside the control of government. There are rules and regulations, but these are not followed. Jobs here are low paid and often not regular. There is no provision for overtime, paid leave, holidays, leave due to sickness, etc. Employment is not secure. People can be asked to leave without any reason. When there is less work, such as during some seasons, some people may be asked to leave. A lot also depends on the whims of the employer. This sector includes a large number of people who are employed on their own doing small jobs such as selling on the street or doing repair works. Similarly, farmers work on their own and hire laborers as and when they require. So now, how to protect workers in the unorganized sector. We have seen there are no rules and regulations followed. They are not registered as well. Now we see how to protect the workers there. The organized sector office offers jobs that are the most sought after, but the employment opportunity in the organized sector have been expanding very slowly. It is also common to find many organized sector enterprises in the unorganized sector. They adopt such strategies to evade taxes and refuse to follow laws. Evade taxes and refuse to follow laws that protect laborers. As a result, a large number of workers are forced to enter the unorganized sector jobs, which pay a very low salary. They are often exploited and not paid a fair wage. Their earnings are low and not regular. These jobs are not secure and have no other benefits. Since 1990s, it is also common to see a large number of workers losing their jobs in the organized sector. These workers are forced to take up jobs in the unorganized sector with low earnings. Hence, besides the need for more work, there is also a need for protection and support of workers in the unorganized sector. Who are those vulnerable people who need protection? In the rural areas, the unorganized sector mostly comprises of landless agricultural laborers, small and marginal farmers, sharecroppers and artisans such as the weavers, blacksmiths, carpenters and goldsmiths. Nearly 80% of rural households in India are in small and marginal farmer category. These farmers need to be supported through adequate facilities for timely delivery of seeds, agricultural inputs, credit, storage facilities, and marketing outlets. In the urban areas, unorganized sector comprises mainly of workers in small-scale industry, casual workers in construction, trade and transport, etc., and those who work as street vendors, headload workers, garment makers, rack pickers, etc. Small-scale industry also needs government support for procuring raw materials and marketing of output. The casual workers in both rural and urban areas need to be protected. We also find that majority of workers from the scheduled caste, tribe and backward community find themselves in the unorganized sector. Besides getting the irregular and low paid work, these workers also face social discrimination. Protection and support to the unorganized sector worker is thus necessary for both economic and social development. When factories close down, many once regular workers are found selling goods and purchasing a cart for or doing some other odd jobs. Sectors in terms of ownership, public and private sector. It is based on ownership. Another way of classifying economic activities into sectors could be on the basis of owner's assets and is responsible for the delivery of services. In the public sector, the government owns most of the assets and provide all the services. In the private sector, ownership of asset and delivery of a service is in the hands of a private individual or a company. Railways or post office is an example of public sector, whereas companies like Tata Iron and Steel Companies Limited or Reliance Industries Limited are privately owned. Activities in the private sector are guided by motive to earn profit. To get such services, we have to pay money to these individuals and companies. The purpose of public sector is not just to earn profit. Government raise money through taxes and other ways to meet expenses on the service rendered by it. Modern day governments spend on the whole range of activities. What are these activities? Why do governments spend on such activities? Let us find out. There are several things needed by a society as a whole, but which the private sector will not provide at reasonable cost. Why? Why? Because they are working for profit. Some of these need spending large sums of money, which is beyond the capacity of the private sector. So capacity also matters. Also, collecting money from thousands of people who use these facilities is not easy. Even if they do provide these things, they would charge a high rate for their use. Examples are construction of roads, bridges, railways, harbors, generating electricity, providing irrigation through dams, etc. Thus, governments have to undertake such heavy spending and ensure these facilities are available to everyone. There are some activities which the government has to support. The private sector may not continue their production or business unless government encourages it. For example, selling electricity at the cost of generation may push up the cost of production of industries. Many units, especially small-scale units, might have to shut down. Government here steps in by producing and supplying electricity at rates which these industries can afford. Government has to bear part of the cost. Similarly, the government in India buys wheat and rice from farmers at a fair price. It stores its godowns and sells at a lower price to consumers through ration shops. You have read about this in the chapter on food security in class 9th. The government has to bear some of the cost. In this way, the government supports both farmers and consumers. There are a large number of activities which are the primary responsibility of the government. The government must spend on these. Providing health and education facility for all is one of the example. We have discussed some of these issues in the first chapter. Running proper schools and providing quality education, particularly elementary education, is the duty of the government. India's size of illiterate population is one of the largest in the world. Similarly, we know that nearly half of India's children are malnourished and quarter of them are critically ill. We have read about infant mortality rate, right? So that is more in Punjab, Bihar. The infant mortality rate of Orissa 87 or Madhya Pradesh 85 is higher than that of a poorest regions of the world such as African countries. Government also needs to pay attention to aspects of a human development such as availability of a safe drinking water, housing facility for the poor, and food and nutrition. It is also the duty of government to take care of the poorest and most ignored regions of the country through increased spending in such areas. So that's all about this chapter. So what all we studied? We studied three sectors of economy as one classification. Second, we have seen what is this? In sectors only we have seen organized and unorganized sectors. Third, we have seen privately owned, publicly owned companies based on ownership. And we understood what are the challenges and how we are trying to improve. That's all for today. Welcome back to Read With Me series. Now we are going to start with chapter 3 of 10th Economics NCERT. Okay. Third chapter, money and credit. So we'll get directly into the chapter, money and credit. Money as a medium of exchange. We'll see money is a medium of exchange. So we'll see in depth about it. The use of money spans a very large part of our everyday life. Look around you and you will easily be able to identify several transactions involving money in a single day. Can you make a list of this? In many of these transactions, goods are being brought and it is bought and sold with the use of money. In some of these transactions, services are being exchanged with money. Okay. For some, there might not be any actual transfer of money taking place now, but a promise to pay money later. Have you ever wondered why transactions are made in money? The reason is simple. A person holding money can easily exchange it for any commodity or service that he or she might want. Thus, everyone prefers to receive payments in money and then exchange the money for things that they want. Take the case of a shoe manufacturer. He wants to sell shoes in the market and buy wheat. The shoe manufacturer will first exchange shoes that he has produced for money and then exchange the money for wheat. Imagine how much more difficult it would be if the shoe manufacturer had to directly exchange shoes for wheat without the use of money. He would have to look for a wheat growing farmer who not only want to sell wheat but also want to buy the shoe in exchange. That is, both parties have to agree to sell and buy each other's commodities. This is known as double coincidence of wants. What a person desires to sell is exactly what the other wishes to buy. In a barter system, where goods are directly exchanged without the use of money, double coincidence of wants is an essential feature. Double coincidence of wants, okay? In contrast, in an economy where money is in use, money by providing the crucial intermediate step eliminates the need for double coincidence of wants. It eliminates. So it is no longer necessary for the shoe manufacturer to look for a farmer who will buy his shoes and at the same time sell him wheat. All he has to do is find a buyer for his shoes. Once he has exchanged his shoes for money, he can purchase wheat or any other commodity in the market. Since money acts as an intermediate in the exchange process, it is called as a medium of exchange. So modern forms of money. So we started with Panchmahal coins, then Gupta coins, Tughlaq coins, Gold mahar for Akbar reign. Modern coin. We'll see now. Currency. Yeah, modern forms of money. We have seen that money is something that can act as medium of exchange in transaction. Before the introduction of coins, a variety of objects was used as money. For example, since the very early ages, Indian used grains and cattle as money. Thereafter came to use of a metallic coins, gold, silver, copper coins, a phase which continued well into the last century. Currency. Modern form of money include currency, paper notes and coins. So currency, both paper notes and coins. Unlike the things that were used as money earlier, modern currency is not made of precious metals such as gold, silver and copper, and unlike grain and cattle, they are neither of everyday use. The modern currency is without any use of its own. Then why is it accepted as a medium of exchange? It is accepted as a medium of exchange because the currency is authorized by government of that country. In India, the Reserve Bank of India issues currency notes on behalf of central government. As per Indian law, no other individual or organization is allowed to issue currency. Moreover, the law legalizes the use of rupee as a medium of payment that cannot be refused. In settling transaction in India, no individual in India can legally refuse a payment made in rupees. Hence, the rupee is widely accepted as a medium of exchange. Deposits with bank. The other form in which people hold money is as deposits with the bank. At point of time, people need only some currency for their day-to-day needs. For instance, workers who receive their salaries at the end of each month have extra cash at the beginning of the month. What do people do with this extra cash? They deposit it with the banks by opening the bank account in their name. Banks accept the deposit and also pays an interest rate on the deposits. In this way, people's money is safe with the banks and it earns an interest. People's money is safe and with the banks it earns the interest. People also have the provision to withdraw the money as and when they require. Since the deposit in the bank accounts can be withdrawn on demand, these deposits are called demand deposits. Demand deposits offers another interesting facility. It is this facility which lends it the essential characteristics of money, that of a medium of exchange. You would have heard of payments being made by checks instead of cash. For payment through check, the payer who has an account with the bank makes out a check for a specific amount. A check is a paper instrumenting the bank to pay a specific amount from the person's account to the person in whose name the check has been made. Let us try and understand how check payments are made and realized with example. Check payment. You can see this is a rough check payment. Okay. The shoe manufacturer M. Salim has to make a payment to the leather supplier and write a check for a specific amount. This means that the shoe manufacturer instructs his bank to pay this amount to the leather supplier. The leather supplier takes this check and deposits it in his own account in the bank. The money is transferred from one bank account to another bank account in a couple of days. The transaction is complete without any payment of cash. Thus, we see that demand deposits share the essential features of money. The facility of checks against demand deposit makes it possible to directly settle payments without the use of cash. Since demand deposits are accepted widely as a means of payment, along with currency, they constitute money in a modern economy. Along with the currency, even check constitute a money. Okay. You must remember the role that a bank plays there. But for the banks, there would be no demand deposit and no payment by checks against this deposit. The modern form of money, currency and deposits. Currency and deposit basically is money. are closely linked to the working of modern banking system, money and deposits. Currency and deposits. Now we see about loan activity of a bank. Let us take the story of bank further. What do the banks do with the deposit which they accept from the public? There is an interesting mechanism at work here. Banks keep only a small proportion of their deposits as a cash with themselves. For example, Bank in India these days hold about 15% of their deposits as cash. This is kept as provision to pay the depositors who might come to withdraw money from bank on any given day. Since on any particular day only some of its money depositors come to withdraw cash, the bank is able to manage with this cash. Banks use a major portion of the deposit to extend loans. There is a huge demand for loans for various economic activities. We shall read more about this in the following sections. Banks make use of deposit to meet the loan requirement of the people. In this way, banks mediate between those who have surplus funds, the depositors, and those who are in need of these funds, the borrowers. Banks charge a higher interest rate on loans than that they offer on deposit. The difference between what is charged from borrower and what is paid to the depositor is their main source of income. Two different credit situations. A large number of transactions in our day-to-day activities involves credit in some form or the other. Credit, that is loan, refer to an agreement in which the lender supplies the borrower with money, goods or services in return for the promise of future payment. Let us see how credit works through the following two examples. Okay. Festival season. It is festival season 2 months from now, and the shoe manufacturer Salim has received an order from a large trader in town for 3,000 pairs of shoes to be delivered in the month time. To complete production on time, Salim has to hire a few more workers for stitching and pasting work. He has to purchase the raw materials. To meet these expenses, Salim obtains loan from two sources. First, he asks the leather supplier to supply leather now and promises to pay him later. Second, he obtains loan in cash from the larger trader as advance payment for 1,000 pairs of a shoe with a promise to deliver the whole order by the end of the month. At the time of a month, Salim is able to deliver the order, make a good profit and repay the money that he had borrowed. In this case, Salim obtained credit to meet the working capital needs of a production. The credit helps him to meet the ongoing expenses of a production, complete the production on time and thereby increase his earnings. Credit therefore plays a vital and positive role in this situation. So second case, Swapna's problem. Swapna, a small farmer, grows groundnut on her 3 acres of land. She takes a loan from a money lender to meet the expenses of a cultivation, hoping that her harvest would help repay the loan. Midway through the season, the crop is hit by pest and the crop fails. Though Swapna sprays her crops with expensive pesticides, it makes little difference. She is unable to repay the money lenders and debt grows over the year into a large amount. Next year, Swapna takes a fresh loan for cultivation. It is a normal crop this year, but the earnings are not enough to cover the old loan. She is caught in debt. She has to sell a part of land to pay off the debt. In rural areas, the main demand for credit is for crop production. Crop production involves considerable cost on seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, water, electricity, repair of equipment, etc. There is a minimum stretch of 3 to 4 months between the time when the farmers buy these inputs and when they sell the crop. Farmers usually take crop loans at the beginning of the season and repay the loan after harvest. Repayment of the loan is crucially dependent on the income from farming. In Swapna's case, the failure of the crop made loan repayment impossible. She had to sell part of the land to repay the loan. Credit, instead of helping Swapna improve her earnings, left her worse off. This is an example of what is commonly called debt trap. Credit in this case pushes the borrower into a situation from which recovery is very painful. In one situation, credit helps to increase earnings and therefore the person is better off than before. In other situation, because of the crop failure, credit pushes the person into debt trap. Okay. To repay her loan, she has to sell a portion of her land. She is clearly much worse off than before. Whether credit would be useful or not, therefore, depends on the risk in the situation and whether there is some support in case of loss. So now we see terms of credit. Every loan agreement specifies an interest rate with the borrower must pay to the lender along with the repayment of the principal. In addition, lender may demand collateral, that is security against loans. Collateral is an asset. It's an asset that the borrower owns, such as land, building, vehicle, livestock, deposits with banks, and uses this as a guarantee to a lender until the loan is repaid. If the borrower fails to repay the loan, the lender has the right to sell the asset for collateral to obtain payment. Properties such as land titles, deposits with banks, livestock are some common examples of collateral used for borrowing. Interest rate, collateral, and documentation requirement and the mode of repayment together comprises what is called the terms of credit. So what are terms of credit? Interest rate, collateral, and documentation requirement. Collateral is security and document requirements, okay, is the terms of credit. The terms of credit vary substantially from one credit arrangement to another. They may vary depending on the nature of a lender and the borrower. The next section will provide example of the varying terms of a credit in different credit arrangements. So we'll see variety of credit arrangements. Example of a village. Rohit and Ranjan had finished reading about the terms of a credit in class. They were eager to know the various credit arrangements that existed in their area. Who were the people who provided credit? Who were the borrowers? What were the terms of credit? They decided to talk to some people in their village, read what they record. So we can to explain more on that. So next we can see this loans from cooperatives. Besides banks, the other major source of cheap credit in rural areas are the cooperative societies or cooperatives. Members of cooperative pool their resources for cooperation in certain areas. There are several types of cooperative possible, such as farmer cooperatives, weaver cooperatives, industrial worker cooperatives, etc. Krishak cooperative function in a village not very far away from Sonpur. It has 2,300 farmers as members. It accepts the deposits from its members. With these deposits as collateral, the cooperative has obtained a large loan from the bank. These funds are used to provide loans to members. Once these loans are repaid, another round of lending can take place. Krishak cooperative provides loan for purchase of agricultural implements, loans for cultivation and agricultural trade, fisheries loan, loan for the construction of houses, and for a variety of other expenses. Now we see formal sector credit in India. Formal sector credit. We have seen in the above example that people obtain loan from various sources. The various types of loans can be conveniently grouped as formal sector loans and informal sector loans, formal and informal. Okay, among the former are loans from banks and cooperative. The informal lenders include money lenders, traders, employers, relatives, and friends, etc. In graph 1, you can see the various sources of credit to rural household in India. This mode is more credit coming from the formal sector or informal sector. So money lender 30%. So commercial banks 25%, and cooperatives we have again 27%. Around 52% is from formal sector. The Reserve Bank of India supervises the functioning of a formal sources of loan. For instance, we have seen that banks maintain a minimum cash balance out of the deposit they receive. The RBI monitors that the bank actually maintain the cash balance. Similarly, the RBI sees the banks give loans not just to profit-making businesses and traders but also to small cultivators, small-scale industries, to small borrowers, etc. Periodically, banks have to submit information to the RBI on how much they are lending to whom, at what interest rate, etc. There is no organization which supervises the credit activities of lenders in the informal sector. There is no one to supervise. In case of formal, RBI will take care. They can lend at whatever interest rate they choose. There is no one to stop them from using unfair means to get their money back. Compared to the formal lenders, most of the informal lenders charge a much higher interest on loans. Thus, the cost to the borrower of informal loans is much higher. Higher cost of borrowing means a larger part of the earning of the borrower is used to repay the loan. Hence, borrowers have less income left for themselves, as we saw for a Shamal in Sonpur. In certain cases, the high interest rate of a borrowing can mean that the amount to be repaid is greater than the income of a borrower. This could lead to increasing debt and debt trap. Also, people who might wish to start an enterprise by borrowing may not do so because of the high cost of borrowing. For these reasons, banks and cooperative societies need to lend more. This would lead to higher income and many people could then borrow cheaply for a variety of needs. They could grow crops, do businesses, set up small-scale industries, etc. They could set up new industries or trading in goods. Cheap and affordable credit is crucial for the country's development. Formal and informal credit. Who gets what? Graph 2 shows the importance of a formal and informal sources of a credit for people in urban areas. The people are divided into 4 groups from poor to rich as shown in the figure. Yeah, you can see here. You can see that 85% of the loans taken by poor households in the urban areas are from informal sources. Compare this with the rich urban households. What do you find? Only 10% of their loans are from informal sources, while 90% are from formal sources. Similar pattern is also found in rural areas. The rich households are availing cheap credit from formal lenders, whereas the poor households have to pay a heavy price for borrowing. What does all this suggest? First, the formal sector still meets only about half of the total credit needs of the rural people. The remaining credit needs are met from informal sources. Most loans from informal lenders carry a very high interest rate and do little to increase the income of the borrower. Thus, it is necessary that banks and cooperatives increase their lending, particularly in the rural areas, so that the dependence on informal sources of credit reduces. Secondly, while formal sector loans need to expand, it is also necessary that everyone receives these loans. At present, it is the richer households who receives formal credit, whereas the poor have to depend on informal sources. It is important that the formal credit is distributed more equally so that the poor can benefit from the cheaper loans. Now we can see one other concept, self-help groups for poor. In the previous section, we have seen that poor households are still dependent on the informal sources of credit. Why is it so? Banks are not present everywhere in rural areas. Even when they are present, getting a loan from a bank is much more difficult than taking a loan from informal sources. As we saw for Megha, bank loans require proper documentation and collateral. Absence of collateral is self-help groups for the poor. In the previous section, we have seen that poor households are still dependent on informal sources of credit. Why is it so? Banks are not present everywhere in rural India. Even when they are present, getting a loan from a bank is much more difficult than taking a loan from informal sources. As we saw for Mega, bank loans require proper documentation and collateral. Absence of collateral is one of the major reasons which prevents the poor from getting bank loans. Informal lenders such as money lenders, on the other hand, know the borrowers personally and hence are often willing to give a loan without collateral. The borrowers can, if necessary, approach the money lenders even without repaying their earlier loans. However, the money lenders charge very high rates of interest, keep no record of a transaction and harass the poor borrower. In recent years, people have tried out some newer ways of providing loans to the poor. The idea is to organize rural poor, in particular women, into small self-help groups. So what is it? In recent years, people have tried out some newer ways of providing loans to the poor. Okay. The pool collect their savings. A typical self-help group has 15 to 20 members, usually belonging to the one neighborhood, who meet and save regularly. Saving per member varies from Rs 25 to Rs 100 or more, depending on ability of people to save. Members can take small loans from the group itself to meet their needs. The group charges interest on these loans, but this is still less than what the moneylender charges. After a year or two, if the group is regular in saving, it becomes eligible for availing loans from the bank. Loan is sanctioned in the name of a group and is meant to create self-employment opportunity for the members. For instance, small loans are provided to the members for releasing mortgaged land, for meeting working capital needs, buying seeds, fertilizers, raw materials like bamboo and cloth, for housing material, for acquiring assets like sieving machine, handloom, cattle, etc. Most of the important decisions regarding the savings and loan initiatives are taken by the group members. The group decides as regards the loan to be granted, the purpose, amount, interest to be charged, repayment schedule, etc. Also, it is the group which is responsible for repayment of the loan. Any case of non-repayment of a loan by any one member is followed up seriously by other members in the group. Because of this feature, banks are willing to lend to the poor women when organized in self-help groups, even though they have no collateral as such. Thus, the self-help group help borrowers overcome the problem of lack of collateral. They can get timely loans for a variety of purposes and at a reasonable interest rate. Moreover, self-help groups are the building blocks of an organization of the rural poor. Not only does it help women to become financially self-reliant, the regular meetings of the group provided a platform to discuss and act on a variety of social issues such as health, nutrition, domestic violence, etc. So, lastly we have one self-help group, that is Grameen Bank of Bangladesh. Grameen Bank of Bangladesh is one of the biggest success stories in reaching the poor to meet their credit needs at reasonable rates. Started in the 1970s as a small project, Grameen Bank now has over 6 million borrowers in about 40,000 villages spread across Bangladesh. Almost all of the borrowers are women and belong to poorest section of the society. These borrowers have proved that not only are poor women reliable borrowers, but that they can start and run a variety of small income generating activities successfully. So, if credit can be made available to the poor people on terms and conditions that are appropriate and reasonable, these millions of small people with their million of small pursuits can add up to create the biggest development wonder. That's about Grameen Bank of Bangladesh. So that's all for today. Chapter 4, Globalization and the Indian Economy. Okay, yes. As consumers in today's world, some of us have a wide choice of goods and services before us. The latest models of digital cameras, mobile phones and televisions made by the leading manufacturers of the world are within our reach. Every season, new models of automobiles can be seen on Indian roads. Gone are the days when Ambassador and Fiat were the only cars on Indian roads. Today, Indians are buying cars produced by nearly all the top companies in the world. A similar explosion of brands can be seen for many other goods, from shirts to televisions to processed fruit juices. Such wide-ranging choices of goods in our market is a relatively recent phenomenon. You wouldn't have found such a wide variety of goods in Indian market even 2 decades back. In a matter of years, our markets have been transformed. How do we understand these rapid transformations? What are the factors that are bringing about these changes, and how are these changes affecting the lives of the people? We shall dwell on these questions in this chapter. Production across countries. Until the middle of 20th century, production was largely organized within countries. What crossed the boundaries of these countries were raw materials, foodstuffs, and finished products. Colonies such as India exported raw materials and foodstuffs and imported finished goods. Trade was main channel connecting distant countries. This was before large companies called multinational companies, MNCs, emerged on the scene. A MNC is a company that owns or controls production in more than one nation. MNCs set up offices and factories for production in regions where they can get cheap labor and other resources. This is done so that the cost of production is low and the MNCs can earn greater profit. Consider the following example. Spreading of production by an MNC. A large MNC producing industrial equipment designs its products in research centers in the United States and then has the components manufactured in China. These are then shipped to Mexico and Eastern Europe, where the products are assembled and the finished products are sold all over the world. Meanwhile, the company's customer care is carried out through call centers located in India. In this example, the MNC is not only selling its finished products globally, but more important, the goods and services are produced globally. As a result, production is organized in increasingly complex way. The production process is divided into small parts and spread out across the globe. In the above example, China provides the advantage of being a cheap manufacturing location. Mexico and Eastern Europe are useful for closeness to the markets in the US and Europe. India has highly skilled engineers who can understand the technical aspects of production. It also has educated English-speaking youth who can provide customer care services. And all this probably can mean 50 to 60% cost savings for MNCs. The advantage of spreading out production across borders to the multinational can be truly immense. Interlinking production across countries. In general, MNCs set up production where it is close to the markets, where there is skilled and unskilled labor available at low cost, and where the availability of other factors of production is assured. In addition, MNCs might look for government policies that look after their interest. You will read more about the policies later in the chapter. Having assured themselves of these conditions, MNCs set up factories and offices for production. The money that is spent to buy assets such as land, building, machines and other equipment is called investment. So, the money is spent to buy assets is said to be investment. Investment made by MNCs is called foreign investment. Any investment is made with the hope that these assets will earn profit. At times, MNCs set up production jointly with some of the local companies of these countries. The benefit to the local company of such joint production is twofold. First, MNCs can provide money for additional investments like buying new machines for faster production. Second, MNCs might bring with them a latest technology for production. But the most common route for MNC investment is to buy up local companies and then to expand the production. MNCs with huge wealth can quite easily do so. To take an example, Cargill Foods, a very large American MNC, has bought over smaller Indian companies such as Parag Foods. Parag Foods had built a large marketing network in various parts of India where its brand was well reputed. Also, Parag Foods had 4 oil refineries whose control has now shifted to Cargill. Cargill is now the largest producer of edible oil in India, with capacity to make 5 million pouches daily. In fact, many of the top MNCs have wealth exceeding the entire budget of the developing country government. With such enormous wealth, imagine the power and influence of these MNCs. There's another way in which MNCs control production. Large MNCs in developed countries place orders for production with small producers. Garments, footwear, sports items are examples of industries where production is carried out by a large number of small producers around the world. The products are supplied to the MNCs, which then sell these under their own brand name to the customers. These large MNCs have tremendous power to determine prices, quality, delivery, and labor condition for these distant producers. Thus, we see that there are a variety of ways in which the MNCs are spreading their production and interacting with local producers in various countries across the globe. By setting up partnership with local companies, by using the local companies for supplies, by closely competing with the local companies or buying them up, MNCs are exerting a strong influence on production at these distant locations. As a result, production in these widely dispersed location is getting interlinked. Foreign trade and integration of markets. For a long time, foreign trade has been the main channel connecting countries. Foreign trade. In history, you would have read about the trade routes connecting India and South Asia to market both in the East and West, and the extensive trade that took place along these routes. Also, you would remember that it was trading interest which attracted various trading companies such as East India Company to India. What then is the basic function of foreign trade? To put it simple, foreign trade creates an opportunity for the producer to reach beyond the domestic markets of their own countries. Producers can sell their produce not only in markets located within the country but can also compete in markets located in other countries of the world. Similarly, for the buyers, import of goods produced in another country is one way of expanding the choice of goods beyond what is domestically produced. Let us see the effect of a foreign trade through the example of Chinese toys in the Indian market. Chinese toys in India. Chinese manufacturers learn of an opportunity to export toys to India, where toys are sold at a high price. They start exporting plastic toys to India. Buyers in India now have the option of choosing between Indian and the Chinese toys. Because of the cheaper prices and new designs, Chinese toys become more popular in the Indian markets. Within a year, 70 to 80% of toy shops have replaced Indian toys with Chinese toys. Toys are now cheaper in Indian market than earlier. What is happening here? As a result of trade, Chinese toys come into the Indian markets. In the competition between Indian and Chinese toys prove better. Indian buyers have a greater choice of toys and at lower prices. For the Chinese toys makers, this provides an opportunity to expand business. The opposite is true for Indian toy makers. They face losses as their toys are selling much less. In general, with the opening of trade, goods travel from one market to another. Choice of goods in the market rises. Prices of similar goods in the two markets tend to become equal, and producers in the two countries now closely compete against each other even though they are separated by thousands of miles. Foreign trade thus results in connecting the markets or integration of market in different countries. So what is globalization? In the past 2 to 3 decades, more and more MNCs have been looking for location around the world which would be cheap for their production. Foreign investment by MNCs in these countries has been rising. At the same time, foreign trade between countries has been rising rapidly. A large part of the foreign trade is also controlled by MNCs. For instance, the car manufacturing plant of a Ford Motors in India not only produces cars for the Indian markets, it also exports cars to other developing countries and exports car components for its many factories around the world. Likewise, activities of most MNCs involves substantial trade in goods and also services. The result of greater foreign investment and greater foreign trade has been greater integration of production and market across countries. Globalization is this process of rapid integration or interconnection between countries. Integration of countries or interconnectedness between the countries. MNCs are playing a major role in the globalization process. More and more goods and services, investment and technology are moving between countries. Most regions of the world are in closer contact with each other than a few decades back. Besides the movement of goods, services, investment and technology. There is one more way in which the countries can be connected. This is through the movement of people between countries. People usually move from one country to another in search of better income, better job, or better education. In the past few decades, however, there has not been much increase in the movement of people between countries due to various restrictions. Factors that have enabled globalization. Technology is one factor. Rapid improvement in technology has been one major factor that has stimulated the globalization process. For instance, the past 50 years have seen several improvements in transportation technology. This has made much faster delivery of goods across long distances possible at lower cost. Container for transport of goods. Goods are placed in containers that can be loaded intact onto ships, railways, planes and trucks. Containers have led to huge reduction in port handling costs and increase the speed with which export can reach markets. Similarly, the cost of air transport has fallen. This has enabled much greater volumes of goods being transported by airlines. Even more remarkable have been the development in information and communication technology. In recent times, technology in the area of telecommunications, computers, internet has been changing rapidly. Telecommunication facilities, telegraph, telephone, including mobile phones, fax, are used to contact one another around the world. To access information instantly and to communicate from remote areas. This has been facilitated by satellite communication devices. As you would be aware, computers have now entered almost every field of activity. You might have also ventured into the amazing world of internet, where you can obtain and share information on almost anything you want to know. Internet also allows us to send instant electronic mails, that is email, and talk voicemail across the world at negligible costs. So information and communication technology, in short, IT, has played a major role in spreading out production of services across countries. Let us see now. Using IT in globalization. A news magazine published for London readers is to be designed and printed in Delhi. The text of a magazine is sent through internet to the Delhi office. The designer in the Delhi office get order on how to design the magazine from the office in London using telecommunication facilities. The designing is done on the computer. After printing, the magazines are sent by air to London. Even the payment of money or designing and printing from a bank in London to bank in Delhi is done instantly through the internet e-banking. Liberalization of foreign trade and foreign investment policy. Liberalization of foreign trade and foreign investment policy. Let us return to the example of imports of Chinese toy in India. Suppose the Indian government puts a tax on imports of toy. What would happen? Those who wish to import these toys would have to pay tax on this. Because of the tax, buyer will have to pay a higher price on imported toys. These toys will no longer be as cheap in the Indian market and imports from China will automatically reduce. Indian toy market will prosper. Tax on imports is an example of trade barrier. So it's a trade barrier. It is called a barrier because some restrictions has been set up. Government can use trade barrier to increase or decrease or regulate foreign trade. So tax can be one mode. And to decide what kind of goods and how much of each should come into the country. The Indian government after independence had put barrier to foreign trade and foreign investment. This was considered necessary to protect the producers within the country from foreign competition. Industries were just coming up in the 1950s and 1960s and competition from imports at that stage would not have allowed this industry to come up. Thus, India allowed imports of only essential items such as machinery, fertilizers, petroleum, etc. Note that all developed countries during the early stages of development have given protection to domestic producers through a variety of means. Starting around 1991, some far-reaching changes in policy were made in India. The government decided that the time had come for Indian producers to compete with producers around the globe. It felt that competition would improve the performance of producers within the country since they would have to improve their quality. This decision was supported by powerful international organizations. Thus, barriers on foreign trade and foreign investment were removed to a large extent. This meant that goods could be imported and exported easily, and also foreign companies could set up factories and offices here. Removing barriers or restrictions set by government is what is known as liberalization. What is liberalization? Removing the barriers set by government or removing the restrictions set by government. It's a liberalization. With liberalization of trade, businesses are allowed to make decisions freely about what they wish to import or export. The government imposes much less restriction than before and is therefore said to be more liberal. World Trade Organization. Now we are talking about globalization, trade. So World Trade Organization, WTO. We have seen that the liberalization of a foreign trade and investment in India was supported by some very powerful international organizations. These organizations say that all barriers to foreign trade and investment are harmful. There should be no barriers. Trade between countries should be free. All countries in the world should liberalize their policies. World Trade Organization WTO is one such organization whose aim is to liberalize international trade. Started at the initiative of the developed countries, WTO establishes rules regarding international trade and sees that these rules are obeyed. 149 countries of the world are currently members of WTO. Though WTO is supposed to allow free trade for all, in practice it is seen that the developed countries have unfairly retained trade barrier. On the other hand, WTO rules have forced the developing countries to remove trade barriers. An example of this is the current debate on trade in agricultural products. Debate on trade practices. You have seen in chapter 2 that agriculture sector provides the bulk of employment and a significant portion of GDP in India. Compare this to a developed countries such as US with the share of agriculture in GDP at 1% and a share in total employment a tiny 0.5%, and yet this very small percentage of people who are engaged in agriculture in US receive massive sums of money from the US government for production and for export to other countries. Due to this massive money that they receive, US farmers can sell the farm products at abnormally low prices. The surplus farm products are sold in other markets at low prices, adversely affecting farmers in these countries. Developing countries are therefore asking the developed countries' governments, we have reduced trade barriers as per WTO rules, but you have ignored the rules of WTO and have continued to pay your farmers vast sum of money. You have asked for governments to stop supporting our farmers, but you are doing so yourselves. Is this free and fair trade? Impact of globalization in India. Now we will see what is the impact. In the last 15 years, globalization of the Indian economy has come a long way. What has been its effect on the lives of people? We look at some of evidences. Globalization and greater competition among producers, both local and foreign producers, have been of advantage to consumers, particularly the well-off section in the urban areas. There is greater choice before these consumers who now enjoy improved quality and lower prices for several products. As a result, these people today enjoy much higher standard of living than was possible earlier. Among producers and workers, the impact of globalization has not been uniform. Firstly, MNCs have increased their investment in India over the past 15 years, which means investing in India has been beneficial for them. MNCs have been interested in industries such as cell phones, automobiles, electronics, soft drinks, fast food, or services such as banking in urban areas. These products have a large number of well-off buyers. In these industries and services, new jobs have been created. Also, local companies supplying raw materials, etc. to these industries have prospered. So now we'll see steps to attract the foreign investment. In recent years, the central and state government in India are taking special steps to attract foreign companies to invest in India. Industrial zones, called special economic zones, are being set up. Special economic zones are to have world-class facilities. Electricity, water, roads, transport, storage, recreational and educational facilities. Companies who set up production units in special economic zones do not have to pay taxes for an initial period of 5 years. Government has also allowed flexibility in the labor laws to attract foreign investment. You have seen in chapter 2 that companies in the organized sector have to obey certain rules that aim to protect the workers' rights. In the recent years, the government has allowed companies to ignore many of these. Instead of hiring workers on a regular basis, companies hire workers flexible for a short period when there is intense pressure of work. This is done to reduce the cost of labor for companies. However, still not satisfied, foreign companies are demanding more flexibility in labor laws. Secondly, several of the top Indian companies have been able to benefit from the increased competition. They have invested in newer technology and production methods and raised their production standards. Some have gained from successful collaborations with foreign companies. Moreover, globalization has enabled some large Indian companies to emerge as multinationals themselves. Tata Motors, Infosys, Asian Paints, Sundaram Fasteners, which is nuts and bolts based, are some Indian companies which are spreading their operations worldwide. Globalization has also created new opportunities for companies providing services, particularly those involving IT. The Indian company producing a magazine for the London-based company and call centers are some example. Besides a host of services such as data entry, accounting, administrative tasks, engineering are now being done cheaply in countries such as India and are exported to the developed countries. Now we'll see about small producer, compete or perish. For a large number of small producers and workers, globalization has posed major challenge. Rising competition. Ravi did not expect that he would have to face a crisis in such a short period of his life as industrialist. Ravi took a loan from the bank to start his own company producing capacitors in 1992 in Hosur, an industrial town in Tamil Nadu. Capacitors are used in many electronic home appliances including tube lights, television, etc. Within 3 years, he was able to expand production and had 20 workers working under him. His struggle to run his company started when the government removed restrictions on imports of a capacitor as per its agreement at WTO in 2001. His main claims the television companies used to buy different components including capacitor in bulk for the manufacture of television sets. However, competition from the MNC brands forced the Indian television companies to move into assembling activity for MNCs. Even when some of them brought capacitors, they would prefer to import as the price of the imported item was half the price charged by people like Ravi. Ravi now produced less than half the capacitor that he produced in the year 2000 and has only 7 workers working for him. Many of Ravi's friends in the same business in Hyderabad and Chennai have closed their units. So batteries, capacitor, plastic, toys, tires, dairy products and vegetable oil are some examples of industries where the small manufacturers have been hit hard due to competition. Several of the units have shut down, rendering many workers jobless. The small industries in India employ the largest number of workers, 20 million in the country, next only to agriculture. So, competition and uncertain employment. Globalization and the pressure of a competition have substantially changed the lives of workers. Faced with growing competition, most employers these days prefer to employ workers flexibly. This means that workers' jobs are no longer secure. Large MNCs in the garment industry in Europe and America order their products from Indian exporters. These large MNCs with worldwide network look for the cheapest goods in order to maximize their profit. To get these large order, India garment exporters try hard to cut their own cost. As cost of raw materials cannot be reduced, exporters try to cut labor cost. Where earlier a factory used to employ workers on a permanent basis, now they employ workers only on a temporary basis so that they do not have to pay workers for the whole year. Workers also have to put in very long working hours and work night shift on a regular basis during the peak season. Wages are low and workers are forced to work overtime to make both ends meet. While this competition among the garment exporters has allowed the MNCs to make large profit, workers are denied their fair share of benefits brought about by globalization. The condition of work and the hardships of the workers described above have become common to many industrial units and services in India. Most workers today are employed in unorganized sector. Moreover, increasingly conditions of work in the organized sector have come to resemble the unorganized sector. Workers in the organized sector such as Sushila no longer get the protection and benefits that they enjoyed earlier. So we see the struggle for a fair globalization. The above evidence indicates that not everyone has benefited from globalization. People with education, skill and wealth have made the best use of new opportunities. On the other hand, there are many people who have not shared the benefit. Since globalization is now a reality, the question is how to make globalization more fair. Fair globalization would create opportunities for all and also ensure that the benefit of globalizations are shared better. The government can play a major role in making this possible. Its policies must protect the interest not only of the rich and powerful but all the people in country. You have read about some of the possible steps that government can take. For instance, the government can ensure that labor laws are properly implemented and workers get their rights. It can support small producers to improve their performance till the time they become strong enough to compete. If necessary, the government can use trade and investment barriers. It can negotiate at the WTO for fairer rules. It can also align with other developing countries with similar interests to fight against the domination of developed countries in WTO. In the past few years, massive campaigns and representation by people's organizations have influenced important decisions relating to trade and investment at the WTO. This has demonstrated that people also can play an important role in struggle for fair globalization. So this is all about globalization and we are expecting fair globalization. Welcome back to Read With Me series. Today we are dealing with Economics 5th chapter from 10th standard. Consumer Rights is the heading. Let us begin. The collage you see below contains some news clippings of consumer court verdicts. Why did the people go to consumer court in these cases? These verdicts came about because some people persisted and struggled to get justice. In what ways were they denied justice? More importantly, what are the ways in which they can exercise their rights as consumers to get a fair deal from sellers when they felt they had been denied a just treatment? DU teacher gets 45,000 rupees for a flawed phone bill. Rohini Society to compensate. Consumer panels cracks. Insurance firm pay 7,000 for theft. Bank fined 15k. Yes. The consumer in the marketplace. Consumer in the marketplace. We participate in the market both as producers and consumers. As producers of goods and services, we could be working in any of the sectors discussed earlier, such as agriculture or industrial services. Consumers participate in the market when they purchase goods and services that they need. These are the final goods that people as consumers use. In the preceding chapters, we discussed the need for rules and regulation for steps that would promote development. These could be for the protection of workers in the unorganized sector or to protect people from high interest rate charged by money lenders in the informal sector. Similarly, rules and regulations are also required for protecting the environment. For example, money lenders in the informal sector that you read about in chapter 3 adopt various tricks to bind the borrower. They could make the producer sell the produce to them at a low rate in return for a timely loan. They could force a small farmer like Swapna to sell her land to pay back the loan. Similarly, many people who work in the unorganized sector have to work at a low wage and accept conditions that are not fair and are also often harmful to their health. To prevent such exploitation, we have talked of rules and regulation for their protection. There are organizations that have struggled for long to ensure that these rules are followed. Likewise, rules and regulations are required for the protection of the consumer in the marketplace. Individual consumers often find themselves in a weak position. Whenever there is a complaint regarding a good or a service that had been bought, the seller tried to shift all the responsibility on the buyer. Their position usually is, if you didn't like what you bought, please go elsewhere. As if the seller has no responsibility once a sale is completed. The consumer movement, as we shall discuss later, is an effort to change this situation. Exploitation in the marketplace happens in the various ways. For example, sometimes traders indulge in unfair trade practices, such as when shopkeepers weigh less than what they should, or when traders add charges that were not mentioned before, or when adulterated, defective goods are sold. Markets do not work in fair manner when producers are few and powerful, whereas consumers purchase in a small amount and are scattered. This happens especially when large companies are producing these goods. These companies with huge wealth, power, and reach can manipulate the market in various ways. At times, false information is passed on through the media and other sources to attract consumers. For example, a company for years sold powder milk for babies all over the world as the most scientific product, claiming this to be better than mother's milk. It took years of struggle before the company was forced to accept that it had seen making false claim. Similarly, a long battle had to be fought with court cases to make cigarette manufacturing companies accept that their product could cause cancer. Hence, there is a need for rules and regulation to ensure protection of consumers. Consumer movement. The consumer movement arose out of dissatisfaction of the consumers as many unfair practices were being indulged in by the sellers. There was no legal system available to consumers to protect them from exploitation in the marketplace. For a long time, when a consumer was not happy with a particular brand, product, or shop, he or she generally avoided buying that brand product or would stop purchasing from that shop. It was presumed that it was the responsibility of a consumer to be careful while buying a commodity or service. It took many years for organizations in India and around the world to create awareness amongst the people. This has also shifted the responsibility of ensuring quality of goods and services on the sellers. In India, the consumer movement as a social force originated with the necessity of protecting and promoting interest of consumer against unethical, unfair trade practices. Rampant food shortages, hoarding, black marketing, adulteration of food and edible oil gave birth to the consumer movement in an organized form in 1960s. Till the 1970s, consumer organizations were largely engaged in writing articles and holding exhibitions. They formed consumer groups to look into the malpractices in ration shops and overcrowding in the road passenger transport. More recently, India witnessed an upsurge in number of consumer groups. Consumers International. In 1985, United Nations adopted the UN Guidelines for Consumer Protection. This was a tool for nations to adopt measures to protect consumers and for consumer advocacy groups to press their governments to do so. At the international level, this has become the foundation for consumer movement. Today, Consumers International has become an umbrella body of 240 organizations under over 100 countries. Consumer International, yes. Because of all these efforts, the movement succeeded in bringing pressure on businesses firms as well as government to correct businesses' conduct which may be unfair against the interest of a consumer at large. A major step taken in 1986 by the Indian government was the enactment of the Consumer Protection Act 1986, popularly known as COPRA. You will learn more about COPRA later. Consumer Protection Act 1986. Consumer rights. Safety is everyone's right. Reggie's suffering shows how hospital. I'll just read Reggie's story. Reggie Matthew, a healthy boy studying in class 9, was admitted in a private clinic in Kerala for removal of tonsils. An ENT surgeon performed the tonsillectomy operation under general anesthesia. As a result of improper anesthesia, Reggie showed symptoms of some brain abnormalities, because of which he was crippled for life. His father filed a complaint in a state consumer dispute redressal commission, claiming compensation of 5 lakh for medical negligence and deficiency in service. The state commission, saying that the evidence was not sufficient, dismissed it. Reggie's father appealed again in the National Consumer Dispute Redressal Commission. Located in New Delhi. The National Commission, after looking into the complaint, held the hospital responsible for medical negligence and directed it to pay the compensation. Reggie's suffering shows how a hospital, due to negligence by the doctor and staff in giving anesthesia, crippled a student for life. While using many goods and services, we as consumers have the right to be protected against the marketing of goods and delivery of services that are hazardous to life and property. Producers need to strictly follow the required safety rules and regulations. There are many goods and services that we purchase that require special attention to satisfy. For example, pressure cooker have a safety valve which, if it is defective, can cause a serious accident. The manufacturer of the safety valve have to ensure high quality. You also need public or government action to see that this quality is maintained. However, we do find bad quality products in the market because the supervision of these rules is weak and consumer movement is also not strong enough. Information about goods and services. When you buy any commodity, you will find certain details given on the packing. These details are about ingredients used, price, batch number, date of manufacture, expiry date, and address of a manufacturer. When we buy medicine, on the pocket you might find directions for proper use and information relating to side effects and risk associated with the usage of that medicine. When you buy garments, you will find information on instruction for washing. Why is it that rules have been made so that the manufacturer displays this information? It is because consumers have the right to be informed about the particulars of goods and services that they purchase. Consumers can then complain and ask for compensation for replacement if the product proves to be defective in any manner. For example, if we buy a product and find it defective well within the expiry period, we can ask for replacement. If the expiry period was not printed, the manufacturer would blame the shopkeeper and will not accept the responsibility. If people sell medicine that have expired, severe action can be taken against them. Similarly, one can protest and complain if someone sells a good at more than the printed price on the pocket. This is indicated by MRP, maximum retail price. In fact, consumers can bargain with the seller to sell at less than MRP. In recent time, the right to information has been expanded to cover various services provided by the government. In October 2005, the Government of India enacted a law popularly known as RTI, Right to Information Act, which ensures its citizens all the information about the functions of a government departments. The effect of RTI Act can be understood from following case. Waiting. Amrita, an engineering graduate, after submitting all the certificates and attending the interview for a job in a government department, did not receive any news of the result. The officials also refused to comply with her queries. She therefore filed an application using the RTI Act, saying that it was her right to know the result in a reasonable time so that she could plan her future. She soon got her call letter for appointment. When choice is denied, a refund. Abhi Rami, a student of Ansari Nagar, joined a 2-year course at a local coaching institute for professional courses in New Delhi. At the time of joining the course, she paid the fee Rs 61,020. as a lump sum for an entire course of 2 years. However, she decided to opt out of the course at the end of 1 year as she found that the quality of teaching was not up to the mark. When she asked for a refund of a fee for 1 year, it was denied to her. When she filed a case in District Consumer Court, the court directed the institute to refund 28,000 rupees, saying that she had the right to choose. The institute again appealed in the State Consumer Commission. The State Commission upheld the district court's direction and further refined the institute rupees 25,000 rupees for a frivolous appeal. It also directed the institute to pay rupees 7,000 as compensation and litigation cost. The State Commission also restrained all the educational and professional institutions in the state from charging fees from students for the entire duration of the course in advance, and that too at one go. Any violation of this order may invite penalties and imprisonment, the commission said. What do we understand from this incident? Any consumer who receives a service in whatever capacity, regardless of age, gender and nature of service, has the right to choose whether to continue to receive the service. Suppose you want to buy toothpaste and the shop owner says that she can sell the toothpaste only if you buy a toothbrush. If you are not interested in buying the brush, your right to choice is denied. Similarly, sometimes gas supply dealers insist that you have to buy the stove from them when you take a new connection. In this way, many times you are forced to buy things that you may not wish to, and you are left with no choice. Where should consumer go to get justice? Read again the cases of Reggie, Matthew and Abhirami given earlier in the chapter. There are some examples in which consumers are denied their rights. Such instances occur quite often in our country. Where could these consumers go to get justice? Consumers have the right to seek redressal against unfair trade practices and exploitation. If any damage is done to a customer, she has the right to get compensation depending on the degree of damage. There is a need to provide an easy and effective public system by which this can be done. You might be interested in knowing how an aggrieved person gets his or her compensation. Let us take the case of Prakash. He had sent a money order to his village for his daughter's marriage. The marriage did not reach his daughter's. The money did not reach his daughter at the time when she needed it, nor did it reach months later. Prakash filed a case in district level consumer court in New Delhi. All the steps he undertook are illustrated here. First thing, he went to the court. It's a post office and he checked. So the consumer movement in India has led to formation of various organizations locally known as consumer forums or consumer protection councils. They guide consumers on how to file cases in a consumer court. On many occasions, they also represent individual consumers in the consumer courts. These voluntary organizations also receive financial support from the government for creating awareness among the people. If you are living in a residential colony, you might have noticed the name board of Resident Welfare Association. If there is any unfair trade practice meted out to their members, they take up the case on their behalf. Under COPRA, Consumer Protection Act 1986, a three-tier quasi-judicial machinery at the district, state and national level was set up. It's a quasi-judicial for redressal of consumer dispute. The district level court deals with the cases involving claim up to 20 lakh. The state level between 20 to 1 crore, 20 lakh to 1 crore. And the national level court deal with the cases involving claim exceeding 1 crore. If the case is dismissed in district level court, the consumer can also appeal in the state and then in national level courts. Thus, the Act has enabled us as consumer to have the right to represent in the consumer courts. Learning to become well-informed consumer. When we as consumer become conscious of our rights while purchasing various goods and services, we will be able to discriminate and make informed choices. This calls for acquiring the knowledge and skill to become a well-informed consumer. How do we become conscious of our rights? Look at the poster on the right and in the previous page. What do you think? The enactment of COPRA has led to the setting up of separate Department of Consumer Affairs in central and state government. There is separate department. The posters that you have seen are one example through which the government spread information about legal process which people can use. You might also be seeing such advertisement on television channels. ISI and AgMark. While buying many commodities on the cover, you might have seen a logo with the letters ISI, AgMark or Hallmark. These logos and certification help consumers get assured of a quality while purchasing the goods and services. The organizations that monitor and issue these certificates allow producers to use their logos provided they follow certain quality standards. Though this organization develops quality standards for many products, it is not compulsory for all the producers to follow standards. However, for some products that affect the health and safety of consumers or of products of mass consumption like LPG cylinders, food colors and additives, cement, packaged drinking water, it is mandatory on part of the producer to get certified by this organization. Taking a consumer movement forward. India has been observing 24 December as a National Consumer Day. It was on this day that the Indian Parliament enacted the Consumer Protection Act 1986. India is one of the countries that have exclusive code for a consumer redressal. The consumer movement in India has made some progress in terms of numbers of organized groups and their activities. There are today more than 700 consumer groups in the country, of which only about 20-25 are well organized and recognized for their work. However, the consumer redressal process is becoming cumbersome, expensive and time consuming. Many a time, consumers are required to engage lawyers. These cases require time for filing and attending the court proceedings, etc. In most purchases, cash memos are not issued, hence evidence is not easy to gather. Moreover, most purchases in the market are small retail sales. The existing laws also are not very clear on the issue of a compensation to consumers injured by defective products. After 20 years of enactment of COPRA, consumer awareness in India is spreading but slowly. Besides this, the enforcement of laws that protect workers, especially in the unorganized sector, is weak. Similarly, rules and regulations are working of markets are often not followed. Nevertheless, there is a scope for consumer to realize their role and importance. It is often said that consumer movements can be effective only with the consumer's active involvement. It requires a voluntary effort and struggle involved the participation of one and all. So that's all about this chapter.